South Carolina. Key facts. Abbreviation SC. Nickname the Palmetto State. Capital Columbia. Flower yellow jessamine. Tree cabbage palmetto. Bird Carolina wren. Dance shag. Motto Dum spiro sparrow. While I breathe I hope. And enemies opibusque parati. Ready in soul and in works. And now, for the first time, I really feel I am in the South. In West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, and North Carolina, the accents told clearly enough which side of the Mason-Dixon line I was on, but it was still a landscape dominated by the Appalachians and their daughter ranges. South Carolina is a whole other world, or a whole nother world, as they would say. The national tree is the cabbage or sable palmetto. There are plenty of views as I travel along the highway through low country South Carolina, past Hilton Head and the words Beaufort, spelled Beaufort much as our Bewley is pronounced Beaulieu. As an attractive palm native all the way from North Carolina down to the southernmost tip of the United States at the Florida Keys. There is Virginia pine to be seen too, usually given in more undignified name of scrub pine. I mention the trees because the greater part of my time being given over to driving, there are the most noticeable features of the roadside landscape. The bright autumnal leaves of New England were dazzling and absolutely particular. Their interplay with the sun as I drove kept the long journeys interesting while I was in the north, and now the different varieties of trees down here tell me a story of the south. The palms hinted something tropical, while the oaks and cypresses especially share an extraordinary southern quality. They are all festooned with Spanish moss. This flowering plant, not actually a moss at all, drapes itself like some strange decoration over the branches of the trees, especially the great oaks. Thick beards of it hang everywhere. It lends a faintly spooky air to the landscape that combines with the saltiness and humidity of the atmosphere to give the South its characteristic air of languor and Gothic mystery. Something else is different too. The architecture. I'm not talking about great plantation houses. I have not seen any of those yet. I mean just the ordinary houses, and the shops too. They are so unusually low and squat and new and metallic, and then I understand. Here, close to the Atlantic shore in South Carolina, we're in the heart of hurricane country. In 1989, Hugo caused billions of dollars worth of damage and many lives were lost. Buildings have to take account of the great tropical cyclones that are generated out in southern Atlantic and scream their way towards the coastline. The lower the profile they present to the storms, the better. And finally, I arrive at that coastline. Nothing had prepared me for the rapturous loveliness of Beaufort and the Low Country. Everywhere there are bodies of water and islands connected by bridges and causeways. Lemon Island, Bluff Island, Goat Island, House Island, Otter Island, and very piratical Morgan Island and Port Royal. It seems like a kind of paradise and an unspoiled historic old town set in enchanted waterways. It's unlikely for all its beauty to have created that impression and the captured Africans who arrived here as slaves. It is impossible to be in the South and not think of slavery. That is not to say the South can never rise again, freed of its own historic shackles, but the completeness of the slave economy and the ensuing trauma of the Civil War and its aftermath have left an indelible imprint. The Gala. I had my first meeting with Miss Anita on the Oaks, heavy with Spanish moss. I joined her on a bench when we looked across the water over the islands and towards the far Atlantic horizon. Thousands of miles ahead lie Cape Verde and Hurricane Alley, where the storms are born and beyond which the slave coast stretches down from Nigeria to Angola. Now I hear you're something of a film star, Miss Anita. Who told you that? Shame the devil. That's what they're telling me. I was in that movie Forrest Gump, which maybe you saw. We was in the choir. They showed it just over there, and G.I. Jane they showed on that island. And the Jungle Book, that's a cartoon, surely. My hand is slapped. Not that Jungle Book, another one. Miss Anita is a leading representative and historian of the Gala people. In my shameful ignorance, I knew nothing of who they were until I met her. We think the word comes from Gola, which also gave its name to the country of Angola. The Gala people were African Americans, but we kept our own language and our own ways. And what is that language? It's what they call a Creole. African, Native American, and English all mixed up like a good salad. The Gala are mostly to be found in the low country of South Carolina and the Sea Islands of Georgia, and it explains their reasons for this. We are the descendants of the slaves who were said to work on the only crop that could make it here where the land is all, what's the word? Waterlogged? That'll do. Waterlogged. The slaves brought with them all the slave ships did the mosquito. Now in the other parts in the land where cotton grows, Mr. Mosquito he couldn't survive, but down here in the low country he loved all the marshes, and Mr. Mosquito he flourished and the malaria was bad. The Africans had the resistance, and for you knew South Carolina had a larger black population than white. Miss Anita tackles this curlicue of history. They have a word in the cotton fields, the Africanized. The cotton slaves were de-Africanized good, but here in the rice paddies things it was different. Not so many whites around, so the slaves weren't never so integrated in the white world. So that how your African language and music lasted longer here. That's how it was. But we were Christianized. Praise the Lord that we were. Whatever one may think of that, and whatever the auditors of celebrating the enforced origin of their slave master, one cannot deny that Christianization of the slaves gave birth to that wonder of world music, the spiritual. Michael Rowe, the boat shore, you know that song? Of course, it was born right here and beefed. We sit and watch the sun set over the islands. I part, promising to return later in the evening to watch the rehearsal of a show she has devised. The show. The rehearsal takes place in what we would call a village hall, the cast consisting of 15 or so of Miss Anita's friends and family, ranging from toddlers to silver-haired old ladies and gentlemen. I am prepared to be horribly embarrassed by an excruciating display of amateur dramatics. The moment the company opened their mouths to sing, I find myself transported. I'm listening to what used to be called in my school days Negro spirituals, sung in the place where they were created by the descendants of those who created them, and sung in that language. This is what astonishes me. I have assumed for years now that the kind of slave talk that pronounces river as riba is unacceptable Uncle Remus minstrel speak and cannot be countenanced. Here the color embrace it. The pageant Miss Anita has devised tells the story of a group of slaves who escape one Christmas on the Underground Railway, the organization established by the by freed slaves and white abolitionists that sprang slaves from the captivity and transported them secretly via a network of sympathizers to the north. Her dialogue is full of references to the massa, the white folks, and the bathing of babies. It is a sort of mommy talk, which is straight out of Butterfly McQueen's famous lines in Gone with the Wind, and which I had thought so politically incorrect and to be virtually illegal. It is rather liberating to know that this language has been reclaimed by its originators and to hear it spoken with such gusto and relish. The aura of taboo is lifted and one is allowed to recognize once more what a wonderful and rich kind of English it is. Every now and again another song is sung. Amazing Grace, Nobody Knows the Trouble I See, Swing Low, I'm entirely captivated. As with the bluegrass in Tennessee, I am reminded once more of the extraordinary power that comes from music that is played in the place where it was born. I decide that I like the South, which is just as well, but there is a lot more of it to come.